We're going to wait just another minute or two because we have about 10 people who aren't signed on yet. So. Okie dokie. Looks like a couple more people signed on. So I'm gonna go ahead and get us started just to sort of like reorient you where we are in things. So today we're keeping going with consciousness. And then starting on we'll keep doing that on Monday. Starting a week from today, we'll start learning. And then 2 weeks from today is your next exam. So the semester just keeps on trucking, which is interesting, a little crazy. So I am going to go ahead and open up today's PowerPoint so we can keep going on states of consciousness. And so we're going to talk more about circadian rhythms. And we'll start talking about some of the other things related to sleep today. Okie dokie. Answering a couple people in the chat who are asking me things, so getting back to them, but I'm going to go ahead and screen share here our PowerPoint. Alrighty. Okay, so we've been talking about sleep and dreams, and so we are looking at the stages of sleep, the biological aspects of sleep. We had just looked at what the brain does while you're sleeping, and as we saw, a lot of it is active, right? So now we are going to talk about how these relate back to the circadian rhythms we talked about at the beginning of class on Monday. Make sure the chat is up in case people have questions. All right, there we go. All right, so circadian rhythms are important, not only obviously to like keep us on some sort of schedule, but also that they are actually linked to not only sleep, but to our health. So that we're going to talk about now tend to be 24-hour biological cycles. So humans and other animals focus and operate on these 24-hour biological cycles. These daily cycles are particularly important in the regulation of sleep, but also in the regulation of temperature, blood production, hormone production, and other bodily processes. Circadian rhythms vary from person to person, and different people might have different optimal times to fall asleep, have a good night's sleep, etc. So they're not the same for everybody. And again, they're going to be determined by a lot of factors in your life that we talked about on Monday, like shift work or
I can't hear you.
Can everybody else hear me? Okay, I'm getting some yeses. So Lara, what you're probably running into, and I'll type this in the chat too, is issues with the internet. So thanks for everyone who's writing back to me. I record these and post them on YouTube and then on Blackboard, mostly for this reason. Lara, I would say maybe try signing back off and back on. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Alrighty. So yeah, again, you all have the misfortune of being at a time where there's a lot of internet traffic on campus. So apologies that you all have to deal with the slow Wi-Fi sometimes. That can be part of your circadian rhythms. I was just about to say that when I was in college, my circadian rhythms were way different than they are now. You know, I used to like 9 a.m. used to be an early class. You know, now I get up at 6, no problem. You know, and I used to stay up till 1 or 2 every night. And yeah, I'm in bed by 10 most of the time because my husband gets up even earlier than I do. So, yeah, this changes.
Professor, I'm having some Wi-Fi problems.
Okay.
No.
Alrighty. So, it regulates your sleep. It also regulates other bodily functions, as we mentioned. So even things like processing insulin and things along those lines. And the physiological pathway of the biological clock, as we've mentioned, it's related to light levels. So when we do have blue screens on, that can throw it off. And then those go into the retina, as we talked about last chapter. That will then go through everything in terms of the optic nerve and go to the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, and that'll go to the pineal gland. And then the pineal gland is what secretes melatonin. And melatonin is that Dracula hormone that we talked about the other day. And this helps you sleep and helps to sort of regulate this part of your circadian rhythms. And so it seems to be based on light levels. And the suprachiasmatic nucleus tells the pineal gland to secrete melatonin. So it's, you know, that's the message way then. When circadian rhythms are ignored or disrupted, if you travel across time zones, if you have shift work, or even varying the time you go to sleep, inferior sleep results, and that can leave you tired, sluggish, and irritable. And some people will adapt more easily than others. But typically, more and more medical doctors and psychologists are recommending that you try to keep a consistent sleep schedule throughout the week, if possible. Now, if your rhythms are off, you might be able to realign them using some techniques developed by psychological researchers. So they've experimented with different ways of helping people realign these rhythms. One is by administering small, carefully timed doses of melatonin, by carefully timing exposure to bright lights. But at this point, there's no one treatment that works for everybody. So you kind of have to like figure out what works for you. Okay, so this is just a diagram of what I said in words on the previous slide, if that makes sense. So here you have the light coming in. It talks to this nucleus in the hypothalamus. And that really is our clock, honestly. Like our internal clock is this nucleus within the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or sometimes called the SCN, within the hypothalamus. And then, as I said, the gland receives the messages that tell it, hey, secrete some melatonin. So when there's light, daylight, it tells us, don't make melatonin, we need to be awake now. And then when it's nighttime, it tells us, okay, let's pick up the production of melatonin. So again, here you can see if you're exposed to lights that are gonna feel like daylight, why you might have a harder time starting to fall asleep, because your body is not producing the melatonin like it typically would. Even when light cues are completely absent, though, melatonin is still released in a cyclic manner. So there have been cases where they have had people do experiments where they stay for a week or two in a room with no light, no natural light. And, you know, they keep cycling, but they do get off of the natural cycle. If the SCN, this suprachiasmatic nucleus, is injured or damaged or destroyed in your brain, say by a stroke, a blood clot, something like that, circadian rhythms disappear entirely. So this really is the critical part that helps regulate these 24-hour cycles. So take a minute to just look at these for yourself and think about which apply the most to you. Nick, I actually am not familiar with this experiment. If you can find a link, I'd love to see it. And we can look at that. It looks like other people are saying it might be an urban myth. I know that there have been studies of people who don't sleep, and it's super dangerous. But if there's a study, I'd be very interested to read about it. And so if you've looked this over for yourself, this is actually a very obviously rudimentary measure of morningness versus eveningness. So morning people tend to have circadian rhythms that are actually slightly shorter than 24 hours, and evening people tend to have circadian rhythms that are slightly longer than 24 hours. And again, this might be something that has changed for you since you started college, for example, or since quarantine, right? There was a time where none of us were really working through things, you know, that well, not really like sleeping on a particular pattern per se, right? So, you know, I think we're back in a rhythm now, but, you know, maybe not for everybody. Now, another thing people have looked at is age and sleep. So our sleep needs change throughout the life cycle. Sorry, I just looked over, and Ryan, you're right. If I don't sleep for a month, I'm gonna die. Yes, anyone would, actually. It's really problematic, and you have all kinds of problems.
I actually read an article saying that people can actually die of sleep, not sleeping.
Yes, you can. I mean, it creates like psychosis-like symptoms. It dysregulates your whole body. It's really bad. Don't do it. Try to get at least some sleep every night if you can. And especially, as you'll see as we go through this, at certain ages. So the sleep cycle just described is characteristic of adults through middle age. Infants and older adults display some differences. Infants sleep more frequently. They sleep 6 to 8 times in a 24-hour period, and they might sleep up to 16 of those 24 hours. Any of you who have dogs or cats know that this is like laughable, right? Cats sleep like 18 hours a day or 20. But for babies, this is a lot compared to, what their waking hours will be later. Up to 50% of the time when infants sleep is REM, actually. And past middle age, the amount of time spent sleeping actually decreases. And there's a significant reduction in slow wave sleep. Comparative studies of sleep in different cultures show very little variation in the amount of time spent sleeping, but larger differences in sleeping arrangements. So co-sleeping with babies or other members of the family. Yes, Kristen, you're not wrong about cats. So they might sleep with the baby in bed, or maybe all their kiddos in the same bed. And many cultures allow for a midday nap, especially where the midday heat is otherwise oppressive and even dangerous. So certainly something that, differs slightly culturally. Getting sufficient sleep is important at every stage of human life. Sleep may benefit physical growth and brain development in infants and kids in particular. And adolescents need about 9 hours of sleep, though they tend to get much fewer hours. And just to put you in perspective, if you are traditional college age, which I know not necessarily everybody in this class is, but you are considered sort of the late end of adolescence. So sort of 22, 24. But especially high schoolers. This is why in Virginia Beach, they actually tried to change the school cycle so that high school would start later, and then they did away with it. I think they were kind of overwhelmed with COVID, and they were like, not one more thing right now. So hopefully they'll revisit it later. So they need 9 hours of sleep. They tend to get many fewer hours. This can have an impact on their academic performance. If they work, it can have an impact on their work performance. If they're an athlete, it can have an impact on their athletic performance. Researchers found that adolescents' biological clocks undergo a shift, causing them to delay their periods of wakefulness by 1 hour. It's really interesting. Older adults also see a shift in sleeping, so we're talking post 65. They tend to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier than in other developmental stages. Individuals older than 40 report waking up more throughout the night. And some of this is just disturbed sleep. Some of it is physiological, right? So some people need to urinate more often, for example. So they'll wake up because of that. And yeah, I definitely, just anecdotes in my life back up the data on this for sure. Today's my dad's birthday. He's turning 70. Woohoo! And he says he wakes up at 5:30 now. And he doesn't have to set an alarm. He's retired. He doesn't need to get up. Just that's when I wake up. So certainly that can happen. Alrighty, so here you can see, I love this diagram. It's a really nice way of looking at REM sleep versus non-REM sleep and how much sleep people, and this is again, should get, right? We know this doesn't always happen. But so again, for those who are 19 to 30 years, you should be aiming for around 8 hours of sleep a night. If you do that, almost a quarter of your sleep is spent in REM. I'm a little more over here, but I still should be getting a lot more sleep than I typically do. It's just life, man, right? Life. But so you can see babies in particular have this most REM sleep, and there's different ideas about that. One is that your brain isn't fully formed when you first come out, because if it was, we would never make it down the vaginal canal. Our heads would just be too big and everyone would have to have a C-section. So there's a lot of brain development that happens after infants are born. And so that's part of it. I think it might be part of that, and also just physical growth as well. Yeah, Elijah, that's a really good question. Why did they sleep the least? I think part of it is to do with this, like having to get up more often. And if we're thinking about it as related to growth, for example, they're done with that, right? Like their noses and their ears keep growing, but that's about it, right? And maybe they're more efficient at consolidating memories or whatever sleep actually does. But yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. It does seem like that, right? But I think for a lot of them, it's probably related to physical conditions, right? Again, like having to get up to use the bathroom, or even if you have some sort of pain that you experience, hip pain, arthritis, that's going to interfere with sleep as well. Yeah, that's a really good question, because it does seem like it should maybe be a you, right, in rebound, because you have a hard time to sleep more, but not necessarily the case. So why do we sleep in general? Well, there's lots of different hypotheses. We're going to talk about the three main ones here. But this is really still hotly debated, and there are more hypotheses than this. So to conserve energy is the first one. So anyone who's played a video game where you have to go rest overnight, right, will get this general idea. Right? You sort of like level back up in your health when you do that. Same principle in real life. The idea that, if we just were up for 24 hours all the time, we would never have any time to like recharge our energy. Hypothesis 2 is that immobilization during sleep is adaptive because it reduces danger. We're not going to like thrash around and hurt ourselves. Okay, that one's a little less believable for me. And then hypothesis 3 is that sleep helps all animals, not just humans, to restore energy and other bodily resources. So 3 has the most evidence, but like I said, it's still hotly debated, and we'll probably have new theories for years to come.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I feel like sleep is kind of important for some reason, because if it wasn't, then there would be no reason for any of the other animals to have it. I mean, can you really think of an animal that can't sleep?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, why would we even if we take like 8 hours as an average, why would we, quote unquote, waste a third of our lives if it wasn't helpful, right? Yeah, I think that's a really good point. All right, so we've already hinted at sleep deprivation being bad, right?
Yep. There's even scary stories about it.
Right. Complete deprivation, typically we can only go 3 or 4 days max without just our body shutting down and being like, no, you need to sleep. Partial sleep deprivation or sleep restriction can happen if you have certain jobs, right, where you might have to be on duty, or you're working weird shifts, or just, again, you're a college student, you're trying to get everything done, right? And if this happens continually, it leads to impaired attention and reaction time, impaired coordination and decision making. Again, these things all sound like what happens when you're drunk, right? So not great. And you can have accidents, not only automobile accidents, but just running into things like that due to your lack of coordination. And then there's selective deprivation. So what will happen with some people is that they will, not get sort of like long stretches of sleep. And so they'll end up with less REM sleep. And we know that REM is really important. And so like, as soon as they go to sleep, they fall into REM more quickly, essentially. And this is that rebound effect. So I have a story I'm going to read to you here. It's not the creepypasta, but it is a true story here. In 1964, a 17-year-old high school student in San Diego, California, his name was Gardner, stayed awake for 264 hours, 11 days, with the help of friends, TV reporters, and playing basketball. On his final day without sleep, he presided over a press conference where he spoke without slurring or stumbling his words, and in general appeared to be in excellent health. I wanted to prove bad things don't happen if you went without sleep, said Gardner. I thought, I can break the record, and I don't think it would be a negative experience. Sleep experts now believe that such sleep deprivation stunts are actually really dangerous. It's often claimed that this experiment demonstrated that extreme sleep deprivation has little effect, other than mood changes associated with tiredness, like mood swings, short temper, and loss of concentration. This is primarily due to a report by researcher William Demmett, who stated that on the 10th day of the experiment, Gardner had been, among other things, able to beat Demmett at pinball. However, Lieutenant Commander John J. Ross of the U.S. Navy Medical Neuropsychiatric Research Unit, who monitored Gardner's condition at the request of his parents, reported serious cognitive and behavioral changes. These included moodiness, problems with concentration and short-term memory, paranoia, and hallucinations. On the 4th day, he had a delusion that he was a football player winning the Rose Bowl and that a street sign was a person. On the 11th day, when he was asked to subtract 7 repeatedly, starting with 100, he stopped at 65. When asked why he stopped, he replied that he had forgotten what he was doing. Sleep deprivation studies indicate that people can function surprisingly well when sleep deprived. Although effects on mood and performance are present, they do tend to be modest. But effects are more severe, and they would be more severe, except like it says on this slide, most people can only go 3 or 4 days without just clunking out. Like their body is just like, no, you're going to sleep now. Sleep restriction, again, is when you have this partial deprivation. And it's common, and it can cause lasting negative effects, particularly in performance, especially with difficult or monotonous tasks. It can be very costly. So 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and the Exxon Valdez were all ecological disasters caused in part by sleep deprivation on part of the workers. There's a lot of other stuff that went down with Chernobyl. If you have seen the HBO series, there was a lot of problems there. Sleep deprivation costs the economy $56 billion annually, a loss of 52 million workdays, and they think it's associated with about 24,000 deaths per year. So when researchers wake subjects up whenever they go into REM sleep and depriving them of this stage, they find that soon the person will try to go back into REM faster. That's that rebound effect I was talking about. The increasing frequency of moving into REM within the sleep cycle is termed REM rebound. This suggests that the body, for some reason, needs REM. And the same rebound effect has been found if you wake people up from slow wave sleep as well. And why? What happens during REM and slow wave sleep? They think that this is where memory consolidation happens. And so for an example of this, if you've ever played an instrument and had a day where you just like weren't getting a piece, right? And you tried and tried and tried, and then you had a good night's sleep, you got up the next morning and you could play it better. Part of what they're suggesting is it might be memory consolidation that allows you to do so. Good question. If you get too much sleep, I think there are fewer immediate cognitive consequences, but certainly, obviously, you're not going to be able to be as active. And we know that being sedentary is related to some health difficulties. Also, being sedentary and not engaging in activities you enjoy is linked to depression. So certainly that's a possibility. And so actually, like, getting too much sleep can end up in this like reciprocal cycle because it can be a symptom of depression as well. Also, getting too much sleep can be an indicator that there's something else going on physiologically. For example, you might have mononucleosis. So if that is happening consistently, it might be worth consulting with your primary care doctor, for example. Yeah, someone said in the comments that your body just wants you to sleep. Yep. Some people's bodies just like won't let them stay up past a certain time. All right, so chronic sleep deprivation, as we can see, is bad, right? It results in decreased alertness and cognitive performance. Extreme sleep deprivation can cause hallucinations as well as speech and movement problems, as we saw hinted at in Gardner's story from the 60s. According to a national survey, 63% of Americans get less than 8 hours of sleep a night, and 31%, so almost half of that, said they get less than 7 hours of sleep a night, which again is not in the realm if you're in sort of this. Ooh, good question, Carter. We're actually going to get to sleep disorders in like a couple slides, so I'll cover it then. But yeah, we'll talk about narcolepsy for sure. And sleep deprivation can affect your decision making. So never sign like a contract or something when you're sleep deprived, like kids on good night's sleep. According to research, adolescents that get 8 hours of less of sleep on a school night were more tired and irritable. They were more likely to fall asleep in school, to be in a depressed mood, and to drink more caffeinated beverages than other adolescents that got out of sleep. That one seems obvious, right? And sleep patterns change for people, like we talked about before. And other issues that you see on the slide, decreased alertness, cognitive performance, inability to sustain attention, less complex brain activity, and adverse effects on decision making that I mentioned previously. So, sleep disorders are one of the things that can cause sleep deprivation. So we're going to go into those soon. There's also just people wanting to stay awake, whether they want to do it to get something done from work or school, or whether they just want to watch Letterman, right? Or keep binging that Netflix show. Worry, anxiety, depression come into play here too. Those are symptoms. Sleep deprivation or difficulty falling asleep is symptoms of all those disorders. Drug usage, whether it's a prescription or a non-prescription medication, a lot of those can interfere with your sleep cycle. And then if you have kids, if anyone else in here has kids or has been around when you have younger siblings or your siblings have kids, they just, the first couple of years, you're just up with them, right? Like multiple times per night, sometimes for no good reason. There's just been times where Quinn is just up in the middle of the night and like chilling in her rocking chair, talking to herself. And my husband and I are like, oh God, we just want to sleep, but she's great. So we clearly can't leave her unsupervised. Like she's 2, she needs some supervision, right? So yes, that definitely, and obviously for a bunch of people, these things all interact. Yeah, Laura, you mentioned caffeine. That would certainly fall under drug usage. Alcohol can interfere with your sleep as well. So although most people report sleeping between 8 and 9 hours per night, the amount does vary a great deal. So you can see there are a lot of people who are getting this good amount of sleep, but then there are a lot of people who are on the lower end, and some people get more. Good for them. Again, as long as it's not too much. All right, so dreams are what we're going to talk about next. And then this will lead us into our discussion of sleep disorders as well. So dreams are conventionally defined as mental experiences during REM sleep. Again, however, more recent research shows that we can dream at other points of the sleep cycle too. They are often based on vivid imagery, often have a story-like quality. They can be bizarre, right? And they seem real to the dreamer. However, many recent theorists have questioned almost every aspect of the definition of dreams. We know now that people dream in non-REM sleep too, although dreams are less story-like and vivid when they're in non-REM. We also show that content is not always bizarre, right? Sometimes dreams are pretty ho-hum. And that oftentimes, again, not always, but oftentimes people will know they're dreaming. Thus, the scientific conceptualization of dreams is changing. Research shows that the content of dreams is usually familiar. Common themes in dreams include things like falling, being pursued, trying to repeatedly do something, school, sex, being late, eating, being frightened, etc. Kiddos' dreams appear to be different from those of adults. Preschool kids report bland images with no storylines when they're waking up from REM sleep, if they recall dreaming at all. Um, Kids under the age of 9 to 11 report dreaming over 20 to 30% of the time when awoken from REM, as opposed to adults 80% of the time. And now what can be happening here? It might be they don't have the words to articulate what they were dreaming, or it might be that for kids that doesn't stick in their memory for some reason as much as it would for adults. Between 5 and 8, kids begin to report dream narratives, but they're not well developed. Adult-like dreams develop sort of around puberty, 11 to 13 years of age, suggesting that dreaming is a cognitive ability that might develop gradually. Freud said that the contents of waking life tend to spill into dreams. He called this day residue. So sort of an interesting way to think about it. People in Western cultures tend to pay little attention to dreams as meaningful messages in their lives, while people from some non-Western cultures are likely to view dreams as important. Information about themselves, the future, the spiritual world. So certainly, again, different people are going to interpret it different ways. Different types of therapy or theories are going to interpret it different ways. Psychoanalysis makes a really big deal about dreams. Cognitive behavioral therapy kind of ignores them, right? So it really just depends. So these are the themes that we see most commonly in dreams. So aggression, friendliness, sexuality, misfortune, success, and failure are all things that we tend to see a lot of people dream about. And obviously, you could have a dream that includes more than one of these. So why do we dream? And here, I believe we have 5 different theories. So, and again, these are not all of them. Again, not something we have one answer to. Probably some elements of truth in a lot of these. So Freud's idea was wish fulfillment. He thought that dreams provided a psychic safety valve to express unacceptable feelings that the id had, this like internal unconscious driving a primitive force that we had inside of us. He said that the content we remember, though, has a deeper meaning. So he called what we remembered manifest content and the deeper meaning latent content. And so this is why he did a lot of work on dream interpretation. Problem here is it lacks scientific support. It'd be almost hard to figure this out scientifically, right? It's just not something we can test in the way that Freud might have thought of it. The second theory is information processing, which we've kind of hinted at already. So dreams help us sort out the day's events and consolidate our memories. But then the question is, why do we sometimes dream about things we have not experienced? Like my most vivid dream was being chased by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I've never actually had that happen in my life, right? So certainly some question there. There's an idea that not only sleep, but also dreams might have to do with our physiological functioning. So regular brain stimulation from REM sleep may help develop and preserve neural pathways. So this might be true, right? That REM just helps us build these neural pathways. But then why do we experience dreams that are narrative and have meaning to us? And then there's activation synthesis, which is REM sleep triggers neural activity that evokes random visual memories, which our sleeping brain then weaves into stories. Critical consideration here is, why do we then also dream during non-REM sleep? And how do we create meaningful dreams in our brains? And the problem with this theory is that dreams can occur during those non-REM sleep. And that, you know, again, these stories, especially in REM, are often very meaningful to us. The cognitive theory says that dreamers' dream content reflects dreamers' cognitive development, their knowledge and understanding. Critical consideration, it doesn't, okay, so like great, right? But it doesn't actually explain the neuroscience of dreaming at all. So again, I think that it's probably elements of a lot of these theories woven together. And that is an element of it, obviously. All right, so sleep problems. Sleep disorders are quite varied. The most common, however, is insomnia. Insomnia is difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. And it occurs in 3 different patterns: trouble falling asleep, trouble remaining asleep, and then persistent early morning waking. So you wake up hours before you have to get up and can't get back to sleep. Difficulty falling asleep is most common among young people, where early morning wakening and trouble staying asleep are more common among middle-aged and elderly adults. Estimates of prevalence of insomnia vary, but it appears that 34 to 35% of adults report problems with insomnia, and about 15 to 17% have severe or frequent insomnia. I'm just looking in the chat. Yeah, that's a really good question, Michaela. Yeah, sometimes dreams feel like memories, right? Rather than something we dreamed. So the prevalence of insomnia can increase with age, and it's more common in men than women. Some people think that they have insomnia when they really do have sound patterns of sleep. It can be pseudo-insomnia or sleep state misperception. So essentially, they think, like, oh, I didn't sleep at all last night, but they actually slept, 4 or 5 hours. So that can happen sometimes. Narcolepsy is falling asleep uncontrollably. So it is marked by sudden and irresistible onsets of sleep, like you can't control it, during normal waking hours. The person with narcolepsy tends to go directly into REM. So there are theories about this, that it is like a rebound effect, that somehow this person isn't getting good REM at night, or their circadian rhythms are off, things along those lines. And then sleep apnea is actually a physiological issue. Oh, that's interesting, Caitlin. Yeah, I'd be interested to see why. Someone else asked about getting insomnia related to other hormonal cycles. Certainly, if symptoms are distressing enough, right? If we're thinking about like menstrual cycles, certainly that could throw it off if you're experiencing pain, things like that. Also, just it's enough, if anything changes in your body, your brain, it's enough to throw things off, right? So that can make it related. So sleep apnea is a physiological issue. So the person has frequent reflexive gasping for air that periodically occurs while they are sleeping, and that awakens them even temporarily. So they literally stop breathing for 15 to 60 seconds, and it can actually cause heart, lung, and brain damage, because whenever you stop breathing, the oxygen stops flowing to all parts of your body, right? So that is one thing that I know when we did neuropsych assessments, we would try to feel out if they were having certain memory problems. Have you ever been tested for sleep apnea, right? Maybe you should get tested for that. So how do we treat these things? So this is an example of what can happen with sleeping pills. That's not great. Not everyone that has sleeping pills has this cycle, but it certainly can happen. So it's often treated with benzodiazepines, which were originally developed to treat anxiety, or Ambien, which is a new generation of sedative. That doesn't lead to the same effects, but certainly had its own weird effects. So I don't know if you all remember in like the early 2000s, there were all these studies about and news reports about Ambien causing people to like sleepwalk and sleep eat junk food and things like that, right? So you might suffer from insomnia, start taking a sleeping pill like a benzodiazepine. You might then feel like you can only fall asleep when using those sleeping pills. So then you start using that regularly. What happens when you do that is your body builds up tolerance, just like it does to any drug. So like if you drink alcohol frequently, for example, then you need more alcohol to get the same effects. Same thing happens here. So the pills begin to lose their effectiveness. So with their doctor's consultation, they'll increase the dose. They'll develop a tolerance to higher doses, and they'll keep doing the cycle, and they get dependent on the drug completely. And then you actually have to get to the point probably where you have to like detox from the drug, because you can't just stop benzodiazepines cold turkey. It's really bad for your body. And then here is the different type of things you can see with sleep apnea. So apnea literally means without breath. So there's obstructive, central, and mixed sleep apnea. Of the three, obstructive is the most common. Despite the difference of the root cause of each type, in all three, people with untreated sleep apnea stop breathing repeatedly during their sleep, sometimes hundreds of times during the night, and often for a minute or longer. Obstructive sleep apnea, which you'll see abbreviated like on diagram 3 here, OSA, it's just terrifying. Yeah, and most people who have it don't necessarily know that they have it. And so it's caused by a blockage of the airway, usually when the soft tissue in the rear of the throat, so like, it's sort of hard to show, right? But like back here somewhere. So when that collapses and closes during sleep. In central sleep apnea, what happens is the airway is not blocked, but the brain forgets to tell, or essentially fails to tell the muscles to breathe. And then mixed, you have both. Like I said, obstructive is the most common. It's rare to have your brain not telling you to breathe. Yeah, very rare. This is what a CPAP machine looks like, which is one of the ways that we treat sleep apnea. So it actually forces air into the lungs, down the throat, to keep that airway open so the person doesn't have the obstruction. Alrighty. There are other types of sleep disorders as well. And these are called the parasomnias. So about 75% of American adults feel they have some sort of sleep problem. So we've talked about insomnia. And give me just a second. I'm going to blow my nose here, y'all, and I'm going to mute so you don't have to listen. Not having to do that nearly as much now, but still a little bit hanging around here. Okay. So we've talked about insomnia. We've talked about narcolepsy. There's also something called REM sleep behavior disorder we'll talk about. But let's start by talking about sleepwalking. So sleepwalking occurs when a person appears to be awake and moving around, but is actually asleep. And they have no memory of their actions. It most often occurs during non-REM sleep, so stages 3, 4, early in the night, and it can occur during REM sleep in the early morning. This disorder is most commonly seen in kids age 8 to 12, but it can occur among younger children or anyone really, adults, the elderly, what have you. It appears to run in families, so probably a genetic component. Contrary to what many people believe, it's not dangerous to wake a person who's sleepwalking, and in fact, it can be dangerous not to. Obviously, if they're going to like walk down some steps or walk out the door into the street, you want to wake them up, right? They might just be confused or disoriented for a short time on waking. Although waking a sleepwalker is not dangerous, sleepwalking in itself can be dangerous because the person's unaware of his or her surroundings, can bump into objects or fall down. In most kids who get it, it tends to stop as they enter their teen years. All right, so night terrors. These are also called sleep terrors. A person experiencing a night terror or a sleep terror abruptly awakes from sleep in a terrified state. They may appear to be awake but be confused and unable to communicate. They do not respond to voices that are often difficult to fully awaken. Night terrors last about 15 minutes, after which time the person usually lies down and appears to fall back to sleep. People who have night terrors usually don't remember the events the next morning. They're similar to nightmares, but they usually occur during deep sleep. People experiencing sleep terrors may pose dangers to themselves or others because of limb movements. Night terrors are fairly common in kids, occurring in approximately 5% of them between the ages of 3 to 5. Kids with sleep terrors can also be sleepwalkers. This sleep disorder, which also may run in families, can occur at any age, and strong emotional tension and or the use of alcohol can increase the incidence of night terrors among adults. Someone in the chat said that they had a story about like talking to their mom in the sleep and not remembering it. Yeah, I mean, if you've just done it once, it's not gonna like be a sleep disorder, right? So if this is causing a problem in your life over and over. Some kids do tend to experience night terrors. Not all. Certainly they experience dreams, and I don't think they're all good. Just like anecdotally, my daughter, for probably a year or so of her life, after we moved her into her crib, every day around like 10:30, 11 o'clock would make little like sad noises in her sleep. So she must have been having a bad dream. But yeah, I don't think all kids get night terrors, but certainly they can have bad dreams. Davion, no. If you dream of falling and you hit the ground, you'll be dead in real life. No, it's not. It's not Inception. So you can't. If you die in the dream, you're gonna wake up and be okay in real life. The only problem would be is if you're actually falling, right? If you sleepwalked while you're having that dream and you're like falling out a second-story window, obviously that could be problematic. So that is something to be aware of as well. So sleep talking, less problematic than sleepwalking. It's a sleep-wake transition disorder. It's usually harmless, but it can be disturbing to sleep partners or family members who are trying to get their own sleep right. Talk that occurs during sleep can be brief and involve simple sounds, or can be loud speeches by the sleeper. A person who talks in their sleep typically has no recollection of the actions, and sleep talking can be caused by external factors as well. So like if you have a fever, if you're stressed, or if you have other sleep disorders. I kind of have a funny story about sleep talking. When I was growing up and I was at a sleepover once, one of my friends sat up and went, and then one of my other friends said, banana. And they were both asleep, but they had a conversation. So that certainly can happen. Yeah. So sometimes they do this. And again, if it's just something you do occasionally, it doesn't disturb anybody, you don't need to get treatment for this, right? It's just when it becomes problematic. Sleep paralysis is something we've hinted at before. So people with sleep paralysis are not able to move their body or limbs, either when falling asleep or waking up. Brief episodes of partial or complete skeletal muscle paralysis can occur during sleep paralysis. Sometimes sleep paralysis runs in families, but we don't know what actually causes it. It's not harmful, but obviously you're terrified if you wake up and you can't move, right? So it can be harmful in that way. An episode of sleep paralysis is often terminated by sound or touch. So unlike night terrors, they will respond to other people. Within minutes, the person with sleep paralysis is able to move again. Sometimes this could happen just once in your lifetime. Yes. Yeah, Davion, because everything was paralyzed, including your vocal cords. So that's why you couldn't scream. Yeah. So some people have it just once in their life, or some people have it quite frequently. And obviously, if you're having it more frequently, that's when you probably want to seek help because it's just going to be disturbing you, right? Okay, and then there is REM sleep behavior disorder, RBD. People with rapid eye movement sleep behavior disorder act out dramatic and or violent dreams during REM sleep. So again, REM sleep is often accompanied by sleep paralysis or what they call atonia, but people with this condition will move the body or limbs while dreaming. So it's usually in men age 50 or over, but it can happen in anybody. It differs from sleepwalking and sleep terrors in that the sleeper can be easily awakened and they can recall their dream. They can recall the vivid details of their dream. In the diagnosis and treatment, they have to rule out neurological disorders. And so they'll use sleep tests to do that and drug treatments as well. So here are some potential cases of REM sleep disorder. So a 16-year-old Kentucky girl dreaming that burglars were breaking into her home and murdering her family got up in her sleep, picked up 2 revolvers, and fired into the dark. She actually killed family members. Horrifying, right? Rare. So I'm not going to read the other ones because they're all like horrible things of people killing their families, but that's rare. Usually they would just sort of thrash around and maybe accidentally smack somebody. But yeah, obviously terrifying. So looks like we have about 15 minutes, a little more left of class, and I have an activity for you all to do. So I'm going to put you in groups, and let me stop sharing the PowerPoint and share a Google Doc link with you before I put you in groups. And so this is a document that just has descriptions of the sleep disorders. And in your group, you're just going to come up with which sleep disorder it might be. So let me make sure I'm sending this to everybody. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm going to put you, let me see how many people are in here. 26. So let me see how many people I'd end up with. I'm going to do 7 breakout rooms. Oh, thank you. Yes, I have to actually share it with you all. Give me a second. I mess this up every time I do a Google Doc assignment. And you'll be able to edit it. All right, you should be able to access it now if you try again. Thank you for letting me know, Caitlin and Lara. So I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, and I'll have you be in there for, let's say, 10 minutes. I don't think it'll take you that long to go through these. Oops, my num lock is off. There we go. Alrighty, and then you'll get a 60-second countdown after those 10 minutes. And one thing that another student of mine discovered in another class is that if you need help while you're in your rooms, there's a question mark down at the bottom bar. And if you hit that, I get a message that you need help, and I can just jot over to your room. So you don't necessarily have to come back out to the main room. All right, so you'll get a notification. Okay, does someone have a question, or am I just getting feedback? Okay, all right, so I'm gonna open the rooms and go ahead, just accept your invitation, head over to there, and then I will be here waiting for y'all. Ooh. Okie dokie, welcome back everybody. I am going to screen share here so that you all can see the answers. Okay. So the first case, Jacob is asleep, and all of a sudden he sits up and screams at the top of his lungs. He lays down and goes back to sleep. Next morning he doesn't have to remember anything. Oh, that is night terror.
Shoot.
So you get home from a night out with your friends, and you hear a roommate talking to someone. You go to her room and see that no one is there. You ask her who she's talking to, and she answers you but continues talking. You carry on a conversation with her without her even waking up. That's like my friends, right? So sleep talking. And again, not necessarily something you have to get treatment for unless it becomes really problematic. Tammy has a very important work project for a couple of weeks, and she's been working on it nonstop since it was assigned. She is so worried because she knows her job depends on this project. She's finding lately she can't fall asleep until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and wakes up many times during the night. That's insomnia, right? And again, very common for adults to experience. And then Tim is working with his lab partner Jack on a lab report that's due next week in class. They're in the library studying and working, and all of a sudden, in the middle of conversation, Jack drops his head and falls asleep. After waking up, he considers the conversation as though nothing happened. So this could be narcolepsy, but if it's like a one-time thing, it could just be you're that tired. I've certainly had people have this happen without them being narcoleptic. And the last one, Janet's father had a problem with obesity for the past year or so. Lately, Janet's mother has been noticing that Janet's father stops breathing briefly during the night. Again, always terrifying. She's getting concerned because it seems to be occurring more frequently, and this is sleep apnea. So, anyone have any questions about those? Those are all pretty obvious, I think. But I wanted to give you a chance to just not have me talking at you, and also a chance to interact with the type of questions you might see as like a multiple choice question on an exam. So that's all I have for today. So I'll let you all out early. We will continue on next Monday. And I will stick around in case anyone has any questions.
Bye.